Hello everybody and welcome to Premiere 202, Premiere Pro for the Filmmaker. We are on class 6 and we are starting to cut a lot of B-roll together and the time-lapse we processed last week and start to get into some of the nat sound and photos and really just bring the story together. So to get started here, I actually had a change of heart on the music as I started to really fine-tune the B-roll. So we got a little bit of a different track, which I'll go through shortly. And then you have the selects B-roll in this week's class, and I went and had cut that down from about 45 to 50 minutes or so of B-roll down to I think about 12 minutes. And then we have our interviews previously, which were sent out, and those have not changed, but we're actually going to edit some of these down even more. So to get started, the big thing is how do you get all the B-roll selects cut down? And there's many different ways when you have so much footage that you start shooting with. For example, we have all these clips here, and you could go one by one and set in points and out points as you edit through these clips and drag them down to your timeline here. But I actually find it a lot easier for myself just to go ahead and get all of these clips here and right down to here and actually start a new sequence with everything. And I like working on the timeline much better. It really gives you a lot of flexibility when it comes to kind of cutting this stuff down and making it what you want. So it's sort of the same principle I used with the interviews when I started to cut the interviews. And if this is a long-term documentary, I would make several different sequences of B-roll that match different types of themes. And for this one, I'm only going to make one additional sequence. And to do that, this new sequence I just created with all the B-roll, I'll call this all B-roll. And I'll make sure this actually finds its way down to my sequences. I'll close this up here. And then I'll duplicate the all B-roll sequence and I'll call this B-roll selects. I already have one up here from before, but this will be new. And then what I'll do is double click to open this one up. And once again, drag this down to the bottom like we did for the interviews. Give myself a little bit more room up here. And on the second one, I'm just going to go ahead and delete everything. Now, you don't want to waste time once again while you're scrubbing through. So what I like to do is just bring my paused and playback resolution all the way down to 1/4. And what I'll do is I'll start to find clips that I actually really think will work. And just really kind of your first draft through if you're editing photos or other things like that. This is kind of like your first round through your photos to pick your main selects, and then you can do a couple more rounds later. So I'll go through these shots and I'll say, you know, that's a nice shot, and I'll just go ahead and cut that down, click here and paste it. And then go to your next one and see what we got here. Just kind of going through one by one and getting a feel for the clips. And this is kind of a more natural way for me to work through my B-roll, where, like I said, I go clip per clip, but actually what I'm doing here is I'm kind of working the clips down. That's a good shot. One thing I didn't do right that first time is I copied it. You actually want to cut this out and paste it to your new sequence. That way, if you miss anything, you come back, all that's left up here is your good and your bad takes. So let me find that first one there. Yeah, that's good. And that way you don't have to worry about renaming everything up in here and making new bins and things like that. It's like you just have different versions of your sequences, and it's very easy to kind of go through that way. So I'm going to work through and find a couple more clips. Here's a good one that I want to keep. Let me just zoom in there and make sure I get it. And then cut that out and paste it down there. You see, you always easier when you're the filmmaker shooting it, because you know how to shoot to edit, so you kind of have a feel for what you're going to have in post, and kind of know why you shot the clips the way you did. If you didn't shoot the clips, you're going to have a lot more time actually watching this stuff through thoroughly. But just once again, you don't have to get this stuff perfect by setting all your in and out points yet. It's just kind of getting a feel for the clips that really stand out to you, that you think are going to be good for the project. Let's find one more here. And I think this was a nice shot, yeah. Their hair coming up. So I'll go ahead and cut this one out. And once again, I just have to click down on this B-roll selects and paste because my cursor is automatically jumping down the line. So basically, by the time I'm done going through and cutting out all the clips I don't want, or all the clips I do want, I'll have a selects reel at the end, and that's going to look something like this right here. And this is what I came up with at the end, is my 12 minutes or so of the shots that I really want to work with. So before we really get started, this is why I picked a new song, and I'll play them both back to back so you can kind of get a feel once you really start picking your best B-roll. So I'm playing, this is the first one we had. You can kind of get a feel for the way these clips are going to work. And it just didn't feel right as I was starting to cut these things together. So I kind of like the way this other song here built up over time. It actually has some nice points at the very beginning for some titles. So you can see there at the beginning, there's that 2 hits, and I can use that a little bit later when I start talking about titles to integrate some titles. So I'm actually going to just mark that with some black video at the beginning of this song. Oops. Let's go ahead and bring a clip down there with black video, and I'll know that's like a marker for my titles. And then I can bring in some of my sound bites as this is building here. What's really cool is you have this build-up process. It's about a minute or so of build-up process, and we have a build-up process in our story here we're trying to tell. It's the models getting ready. You can see they're getting their makeup on and their hair, and you know, that time lapse that we did with, actually let me go ahead and get that down to the timeline here. That's under the time lapse. I went ahead and imported that from last week. You have the time lapse of them getting ready, and then you have kind of this build up of them starting to get out there onto the set to get photographed. And then right here at about a minute in, you have a really cool kind of hit. So right there where it hits, I thought that would be a really cool section to integrate the first still grab. So the other thing that we do have here at the end, oops, that we'll bring in is our pictures, our photos. And so I have about 14 photos here, and you can just kind of see there's a group shot in here. Oops. And one thing to keep in mind if you're having trouble importing any kind of photo into Premiere, it actually works the same way as any other file type, except if they're a certain type. James had sent me TIFF files, and so the TIFF files I had to convert over to JPEGs. And so this is that photo I think would be really cool to hit with if we can match as they get prepped, and then this is kind of an epic shot that we can use on that hit of that music. But if you want to convert these TIFFs into JPEGs, the easiest way I found without having to go into Photoshop is a little program called QuickScale. I don't know how much this one costs. It's pretty cheap, I think. But basically, you can just drag and drop your TIFF files in here. And scaling's normal and take off width, height, and percentage. You could change these if you wanted to. But keep original name and quality, whatever percentage, and then you just export, and then it sends them to a new folder, and go ahead and export and change those all around for you in a batch. It's a lot easier than Preview or anything else I've used before. So basically all I had to do is import this JPEG folder, and all of my JPEGs will come into Premiere. It takes Photoshop files, it takes a bunch of different files, so just have to find the ones that do work, but JPEG's fine. And once you have these in, they're going to be very, very large files. One thing I wanted to show everybody real quick is, and this is something I didn't necessarily cover in a previous class, is under your B-roll here, if you want to see your width and your height of your media, basically your resolution, when you come under metadata display, there is a section, I think this is it, under dynamic media. You have to scroll all the way over, and there it's hiding under height and width. And so what you want to do is drag these things all the way back over here and kind of put these up with your frame size. So you have your height, and now you have your width, and then you have your frame rate. So they're kind of hidden. Everything else that you really need to use is under the Premiere Pro project metadata, but you actually have to go to under dynamic media to get the height and the width of what you're working with. But you can see here our photos are 4K. They're almost 5K actually. This one's 4992 by 3328. So we're talking about massive file sizes here. And so what I'm going to have to do when I start dragging these down is working on scaling. So there's that first photo that we know we want to use for the hit. So let's just go ahead and bring that down now. And just so you know, if the photos come in like this, really basically only a couple frames, you can change that under, I think it's general rate here, and then still image default duration. If you want it to be a couple seconds or 5 seconds, it's in frames, so 24 frames, and you multiply it times however many. So we'll just do 48 frames by default for this, and that way when you drag down, oops, you will have, I think it needs to be restarted or something to make the update, but it will work once you make those changes under your still image default duration. Oh, you know what that is? That's when you import it actually. So you have to go back and re-import the files. But one thing that's handy for is if you have a bunch of files and you just want to do a quick kind of piece between them, so it just kind of cuts real fast. And you had a bunch of stills. It's best to change those before you import them, and then you'll kind of be set. But either way, you can drag it around. And so we know we want this right at that hit, that picture. But it's really zoomed in here because we're working with such a massive file. So one little trick is, and this works with any kind of media footage. So if you're in a 720p project and you're bringing in 1080 footage and you want to match it or whatnot, you just right click and you say scale to frame size. And it's a lot faster than going in and trying to match it under your effect controls and motion and bring up your position or bring up your scale until it kind of feels right. It'll kind of get you pretty much where you need to be. Now, we're going to go over in the next class how to really manipulate these images and add add keyframes to them and do things like that. But in this class, we're just going to go and stick these on the timeline where we want them to evolve. And so moving on with this audio here, it kind of has this more picked up beat here, and then it slowly kind of cuts down here at the end. kind of goes in this muffled stage. But what's interesting is I don't need this to be more than, 2.5 minutes max. So when this part cuts down, it's the same kind of thing as what's going on over here with this cut. So what I want to do is find the last 4 beats, and this is some pretty simple audio editing in Premiere that you can do with bringing music together and basically remixing a track. So let's listen here. Okay, that's where I want to start. Okay, because that's the last 4 beats. What I want to do is I want to find the last 4 beats of this over here. So it's back here. So that's the start of another section. So basically bring that down, hit the X key, bring these back here. So this will wrap me into my conclusion, and it was pretty seamless. I can come in here and really fine-tune where these transitions are. That sounds pretty seamless to me, and that's just finding the mix and the beat. If you did need to go in there, you can always hit the H key and kind of go frame by frame and between that cut. And oops, sorry. Go frame by frame between those audio cuts and kind of trim that edit back and forth until it gets perfect. So we kind of have our music cut down the way I like, and we kind of know the general piece. This part up to here is going to be prep. Then we're going to have some cool, just them getting their photos taken with some more still grabs. And then in here, as this kind of slows down, we're going to use another quote of his to kind of wrap things up with having fun. So we have these interviews here.
We're here in my downtown studio photographing a bunch of models, some stylists, and some makeup artists, and we're here and we're having a great time in the studio and just doing some good work.
So I know I want to use this soundbite to open it up, so I'm going to cut that out and bring it back here to the beginning. And that's going to come right after the titles. So right at this second beat, it's going to come in here.
Hey guys, I'm James Douglas. We're here in my downtown studio photographing a bunch of models, some stylists, and some makeup artists, and we're here and we're having a great time in the studio and doing some good work.
So that sounds pretty cool. And one thing I want to do before I move on is let's bring my audio gain down just a little bit here, because you can already see I was peaking. So you want to watch. You want to give enough room so the B-roll, has some room to breathe too, so you're not going way over the top. So let's bring this down to -3 to start on these clips. And then let's see what James sounds like. James is a little bit low. Let's try it at 15 or so here. See what that sounds like.
Guys, I'm James Douglas. We're here in my downtown studio.
We're just staying right under there, which is good. So what I want to do is select all of them, and let's try this at 15.
Hey guys, I'm James Douglas.
See, I'm peaking a little bit now, so let's bring that down to, let's try 13.
We're here in my downtown studio photographing a bunch of models, some stylists, and some makeup artists.
Still peaking a little bit.
Studio photographing a bunch of models, some stylists, and some makeup artists, and we're here and we're having a great time in the studio and doing some good work.
Okay, well, the other thing I want to do here is actually bring down my audio. So same thing we did before. I'll just hit the C key and go in and set a cut there. I'm holding the shift key to snap into these points here. I'm going to set another cut here. And now I'm going to go ahead and put a constant power on both sides of my track. And then right click in the middle. I'm going to bring this down some more, probably to like -7 or 8. Let's try 8.
Hey guys, I'm James Douglas. We're here in my downtown studio photographing a bunch of models, some stylists, and some makeup artists, and we're here and we're having a great time in the studio and doing some good work.
And you can see this section here is a little bit quiet, but it's okay. We might bring some of this back up in here, but I think that's going to be fine for now because we're going to have some B-roll. So have your titles at the beginning, and then that's going to cut into the interview. Now you can see we got cuts in the interview, so we got to start getting rid of some of those cuts. So let's see what we have in here to get started. I have a few that would be good to open. So I have this shot here of the stage when he's talking about his studio, and I have a kind of tighter shot of the clothes, and then him just kind of getting into the feel of things. So let's see if this will work over top of my cut here, my edit here. And one thing I want to show.
We're here in my downtown studio photographing a bunch of models, some stylists, and some makeup artists, and we're here and we're having a great time in the studio and doing some good work.
There we go. And that you want to kind of listen to that music so you can kind of cut in and out of beats. So right where that, so right there before that next beat hits, I'm gonna just drag this over. So that way that cuts there. Now, this stuff doesn't have its nat sound with it. So one little trick that I want to teach everybody is if you want to get your sound back, like say you have B-roll and you somehow lost the audio to it. The easiest way is to start at the very beginning of that clip, hit the Y key if you are set up to match my keyboard shortcuts. Make sure that video 2 is highlighted here, so when you hit the Y, it match frames basically that clip. Then you want to just click up here and then hit the E key to set an endpoint. From there, you can go ahead and drag just the audio. Oops. Drag just the audio down so it starts in line there, and then drag out to match that clip. Now to make sure you got that right, you just select both up top and the bottom of the movie and the audio, right click and say link. And you should have a line that appears and you will have no issues there. Let's see if we did that wrong though. Okay, so let's go to the next clip here. I hit the Y key and that's going to match frame. Let's say I don't select the endpoint the right place. Let's say the endpoint's back here for some reason. When I drag this down now and I bring this clip back, when I go ahead and try and match it and link it, it's going to tell me it's off 4 frames. So what I did wrong that time was when I hit my Y key here at the beginning, I had to set my endpoint again up here. And I can just set an out point there, wherever, drag it down, drag it back out, select both up and down, right click, and link them. So that's a pretty simple process to get your mix back. Now I don't actually want any nat sound here anyways, because he's talking and it's just going to be distracting. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those clips. But in general, I do want nat sound in here. So I'm going to build a little montage in here of some of them kind of working through getting ready with the hair, some of these dolly shots. There are a lot of dolly shots in here, but you don't want to do them all back to back. You want to be able to break them up. Let's get rid of that other audio track. And you want to keep some of that nat sound for sure, so you have that to work with as well. And then I want to make sure my time lapse is in there too, right before we cut over to the photos. The other thing, as I start to put together my track, is I want to start making sure that my audio here has cross dissolves wherever it needs to go. And so with my interviews and all these sections, I just want to make sure this constant power is starting to really be evolved throughout the audio, so it comes together right. So let's see what else we have here. I think the next clip I want to add. The other thing I did want to mention actually here while I'm picking clips. is you want to, be able to tell a story with your clips in some way so they transition. So this is a good example of that. And hopefully whoever's shooting it is able to sequence, and that'll help you a lot in post, getting close-ups and cutaways and ways to cut between two shots. So this shot here is a cool piece. Let's just bring this in a little bit. And I know that matches with just this section here. So we're going to cut away to this next. Now, the way that I normally start to cut stuff down on the timeline is I'll actually lock down my audio tracks. And that's as simple as clicking the audio there. And then you can either do one of two things. You can start to do what we've done in the past by Xing, selecting in and out points of where you want to cut out and Xing that out. Since it's locked, since your audio track here is locked, it's not going to X out that. Or what I like to do is actually use my ripple edit tool here. So I'll find like where I want it to start. Let's see, I think does this come back up here? Yeah, right in here is where I like. So I'll just bring this back up to here and then bring this out. And it's kind of just moving around with it naturally. So we have this clip is kind of coming up there. I just want a little bit of that. And then, so that's a nice cut right there. And it's just as simple as bringing that back in line here. And I'll just continue adding more B-roll down the line. We talked a little bit about just how to cut down the B-roll, the different techniques this week. We also talked about taking stuff from the source monitor or from the timeline when you're editing with B-roll. We talked about the match frame using the Y key and how to relink your audio that way. And then also just timing things out to the music. Actually, let me show you the second portion of where I want this other interview to kick in, because I have some other sound bites, but as I was playing through, I didn't really care much about the gear stuff. When he's talking about that, it just didn't really fit for this kind of piece. There was too much other good vibe going on with everybody having fun, so
I really try to have fun with everybody on set. You connect.
Now this was the way I really like to end it. So I didn't even use these other two sections of the interviews that I edited down. But I really liked what he said here.
I really try to have fun with everybody on set. And you connect to them, and these are the people that hopefully want to be the kind of guy that you guys are going to call up and have, not only for jobs, but just for beers and to hang out. And, hey, man, what are you doing today? I always try and have that connection with everybody that I'm working with, even if it's from models or art directors. When you have that rapport and that balance, you can really start talking to them. That's when you get your really, really good photographs.
So that's a really good soundbite, and why that works so well. Let me bring this back in to right at this end cut here. Why that works so well is I have some really cool B-roll near the end. Everybody just having fun, and James is like dancing around like a crazy guy, bunny ears, and just just a good vibe going on. So I wanted to end in that way after, because you traditionally think of models in a different way when you have these amazing photos of them than the fact that they're just people that want to have fun and want to have a good time on set. And I think for James and telling the story about him, that's really what he brings to the table, where no other photographers I know can do that and just really just be fun and have a great time. So I think that's a great way to wrap up here. And it's kind of cool as this settles down here. Once the music settles down on that beat. Right here. I'm just going to bring this back.
I really try to have fun with everybody on set.
Once again, I'm going to cut this audio down here. And then bring this section. Oops. Make sure I set my other cut here as well. C key. I'm going to set this section down to -8 again.
really try to have fun with everybody on set.
And then set some constant powers between that so it dissolves.
I really try to have fun with everybody on set. You connect to them.
And he needs to be brought up again to about 12 or so, and I might bring this audio down again to -10.
And you know, these are people that I hopefully want to be the kind of guy that you guys are going to call up and have, you know, not only for jobs, but just for beers and to hang.
And then what's going to happen here at the end,
that's when you get your really, really good photographs.
Really good photographs. We'll end with a little montage of photos here that kind of piece things together. So I want to see what you guys do with all of this media, with the B-roll and the audio down here and the song that you pick out or you choose, and the photos that I've sent out and the interviews. And I don't want to give too much away this week on how I'm going to finalize this, but next week I'll have all of my B-roll on the timeline, and we're going to start by adding our titles, and we're going to add some of our other effects and kind of go through what these effects are up here, and just really basically wrap up the project and do everything but the color correction. So I hope everybody found that valuable and helpful, and I really look forward to seeing how you guys are going to cut all this together so far. Thanks so much, and talk to you guys next week.